Torment and so it requires a lot of writing.
Thanks for joining me tonight. I was really hoping there'd be food. Did you guys eat beforehand?
No, well, I did actually.
Okay.
I went to Cafe Versailles and I'm still smelling it.
Don't burp, please.
We're still smelling it.
Thanks for the correction, Judy.
Well, thanks so much for joining me. I'm going to start off with probably a juvenile approach here, but I hope you don't take it that way. We hear so often about how TV's changing and people are watching on different platforms. You know, Xbox is coming out with stuff, AOL is coming out with stuff. So I want to go around the table and maybe if you guys can first, in one word, how would you describe TV today? And if you want to elaborate on that word.
One word. Being to the left of you is really painful right now. One word. Is avant-garde 2 words?
Hyphenated.
That's two words.
That's, I think it counts.
I don't know. I just think that it seems like right now that all the progressive stuff is happening on
one
television.
word, buddy.
No, but
Oh wait, then I got to elaborate. I picked my word and then I'm elaborating them.
Now we have to elaborate?
Yeah, I
Sounds like someone's got her word.
Yeah. I don't want to say, the
Avant-garde.
Well, not avant-garde. It's not the right word. The word I'm looking, because in the original, the definition of the French is the front of the line and the pioneering spirit right now. It seems like a lot of what's happening in television is really progressive. And I look at the movies and I look at some of these television shows, and there's a lot of these television shows I'd rather watch. So it's not avant-garde, but it's something progressive. Progressive is. How about progressive?
We'll take progressive.
Thank you.
Thank you. Juliana?
It was good. It was good.
Thanks.
I think it's the golden age of television. That's not one word. But I don't have to elaborate on that because I said it all. I think I agree with Liev. I think it's a time when Graydon Carter wrote it somewhere where he said there was a time when he was a kid and movies were for adults and TV was for children. Mm. And now it feels like TV seems to be for adults and the movies are all the sequels and prequels and God knows what for children. And so it feels like we've matured in the television world to a higher standard.
I agree.
Your turn.
Vera?
I got a few words, but I evolved, I guess. Just the evolution of, I think, technology and it's changed the way we receive stories. I think film used to be holier just in sort of the construct of it. You are looking up at a screen. It's dark. There's a mysticism there. It's meant to be seen within a congregation of an audience. Hopefully if the story is good, you'll walk away enlightened and transcendent. But I think with the hustle and bustle of life, I don't remember last time I went to and paid for a ticket because I live upstate New York. I don't have half hour to travel there, half hour to watch previews, and then and then drive home another half hour. I want it now, and yet we're all so disconnected, I think, with technology that we're craving that connection. I think television episodics in particular, I think, have become more important and vital, and we're yearning to make these connections with these characters, and so television has just become more important and independent. What was my word?
Evolve.
Evolve.
That was a good one.
That was a solid word. Really good one.
That was really good. We'll have to follow that. Wow. I don't know, daring or brave, both those words. I grew up watching like Happy Days and stuff, and nobody ever said, did you see what happened last night on Happy Days? And I love Happy Days. But people sit around water coolers now and they're like, don't tell me what happened. So, it's interesting. It's I remember when I first started acting, somebody would say, "Oh, guess what? I got this TV show," and you go, "Oh, it's cool. Just keep trying. It'll get better." And now TV is where it's at. I mean, television's so good now, and I'm a huge fan of all the shows. I watch everything, and I never used to do that. So I don't know, but it's like she said. I mean, with all the technology and everything, it keeps people tuned in and hanging on the edges of their seats. So
Daring, good word. Lizzy.
I'm going to go with multi-layered. I was just going to say layered, but then I realized we could use hyphens, so I'm going to go multi-layered. I think that in making a show on cable, or really anywhere now, you get to tell a 12-hour-long story. And television, certainly when I started out, you had to tell a beginning, middle, and an end within one episode. And now we get to tell these stories over such a long stretch of time that we get to tell them really, really well, and with so much detail and so much nuance. And you don't get to do that in a movie because you do have to wrap it up in a couple hours generally. And so I agree. I think movies are old news. Not really. I really would like to do a lot of movies.
In the LA Times
I know.
It's the worst thing you can say. I would piggyback on what Lizzy said, and to a certain point what Vera said as well, and just say creative. It's given these storytellers so many more opportunities to tell their stories in a creative way. They're not beholden to a procedural element where they have to, like Lizzy was saying, have to wrap it up in 48 minutes or however long. And there's also so much more leeway and opportunity in how you distribute your content. As you mentioned, whether it's over Xbox or AOL or Netflix or fill in the blank. You can watch it. I've watched the first season of Damages on my phone. I mean, and that was that was years ago. And now it's even easier to do that kind of thing. The creativity in distributing content, as well as the creativity of the content, have both kind of ramped up significantly from the days when we were all kids watching TV. There's just so many more avenues to get it out there. And what Julianna said is actually quite true, and what Lizzy kind of picked up on as well, is just like movies are a different thing at this point. They exist to sell merchandise, or they exist to sell toys instead of and appeal to a certain segment of the demographic that does go out and does spend money because they don't have jobs and they don't have kids and they don't have to drive a half an hour to get someplace. They're kids and they live there and they want to go see whatever the movie is. And sometimes those movies can be quite good. I loved the Lego movie. I was like, man, this movie's great.
Everything is awesome.
Everything is awesome. I literally walked out singing that song and wanted to go see it again. The irony was not lost on me. But those are few and far between, it seems. And again, in that world, it's become so diluted with those types of films that the little ones that do have a story or do have something original or interesting to say get kind of lost in the noise. Whereas I feel like in the television landscape, the shows that are represented here are telling stories that are being elevated out of the noise and celebrated, and people are watching, are talking about them, and are blogging about them and writing critiques about them, and really engaging with them as the way that we used to do with the movies.
Right. Well, I'm going to add a word that piggybacks off of everyone and say overwhelming. As a TV reporter, my DVR space is constantly full. Like Sunday especially, there's just not enough time. And I go to sleep at 3 a.m. sometimes because I want to see everything. That's the problem, is I want to catch up on Walking Dead. I want to see Good Wife. I want to see Ray. I want to see Mad Men. I want to see Bates. I want to see Masters of Sex. So it's
Are all our shows on Sunday nights?
all but Vera's, I
Oh
believe.
my God, that's horrible.
That's wild.
Yeah, we should hate each other.
Death match. Yeah. Well, a lot of you have been with your characters for quite some time, some longer than others, but is there something about your character that frustrates you, or a moment that has frustrated you about your character? That you wish they acted differently in a moment, or?
Well, mostly every single moment of my character's existence is a frustrating element because it's just a continual series of making poor decisions. But I mean, that can be interesting as well. That's part of you know, if you were just telling stories about people that made great decisions all the time, everyone would be Superman, and it would be the perfect world. I think we find that a storytelling arc is more interesting when you go left when you should have gone right, and then you set up, you know, trying to get back to right. I think that's the point.
Anyone else? Has there been a moment though where you were like, I would have acted differently, or I wish she wouldn't have done that, or he wouldn't have done that?
They had my character taking, one of the earlier scripts was he takes his brother's drugs, and he's said a bunch of racist stuff, and I worked with him and changed it to, I said I'd rather be an Al-Anon member than an Alcoholics Anonymous member. I'd rather grow up in that world and hate it. So they allowed me to change a lot of things, and where I found it more interesting. But I found that with television, I'd never really been on TV before, but you get this opportunity to sort of drop these little seeds behind you as you do other things, and sometimes those seeds turn into trees and storylines and all these other things. So you kind of indirectly get to mold where you're headed, you know.
Yeah, I don't really think it's our job to judge what our characters do or see it as right or wrong or compare it to how we as people in real life would behave. It's more, how can we justify these things that they do? How do we make these the right decisions for the characters in real time? And I mean, that's kind of our job.
And how best do we, as court-appointed lawyers, defend that character's choice for doing that? I'm with Jon. I disagree with everything that Norma Bates, her choices, but I mean, her whole life is a construct of lies. You know, just that she's built brick by brick. Yeah, but I love defending that.
I mean, I think it's one of the things that I find interesting in listening to all these actors talk about their roles that is indicative of the quality of television nowadays. That as actors, we're allowed characters with duality, and I think that's, you know, that's something that actors love. You know, to be able to contain something in its opposite is really a wonderful exercise, and I think that's something that Ann Bitterman does really well on Ray Donovan. But I agree with Lizzy that I never try not to judge my characters, you know. Or now that I'm on a television show, character. But no, I enjoy it. You know, it's one of the things that, you know, I was always a little intimidated by film acting. I mean, I enjoyed it and it was great, especially when I paid off my student loans. But there was a pressure to it. There's something about language that I really enjoyed. That it was something maybe that I hid behind a little bit, and it's very interesting to me to play a guy who doesn't talk a lot.
Doesn't talk a lot.
Because it's actually nothing like me. But that was it's a sort of a lesson in film acting for me. Is sort of that experience, and sometimes I wish that he had more lines, and then I realized, no, that's not what this is about. It's about it's a different kind of exercise.
My biggest concern for Ray was I was worried that he's never laughed before. And then finally we see I think it was the first time he laughed was when remembering his sister, like memories of her. But yeah, I was like, I hope he like laughs sometimes. It's not always so dark.
Yeah, no, I was in the beginning. You don't get directed as much as you do in the theater and television, because these directors come in and they're sort of behind the relationships, you know, that everyone else has been there, and they don't know you as well, and so they sort of defer to you a lot, which I wasn't really accustomed to. I'm accustomed to being directed. And so I'm talking to David Nevins, who's the head of Showtime, and I remember after the third episode, and I guess he'd seen some rough cuts, he simply said to me, you know, Liev, it might be good to find a couple places to smile. Okay, I'll try.
How about Julianna? I mean, there are moments where I know myself watching Alicia, I wish she would have like kissed Will in a certain moment, or like, you know, given Peter the finger in another moment. Had there been moments for you where you were frustrated with her?
Yeah. I mean, But again, it's the joy of playing it. It's the challenge, and it's what makes it's what makes it fun as an actor is to play. She's so opposite from who I am. I mean, I also oftentimes wish I was more like her. She absolutely thinks before she says a word, and there's this incredible stillness about her that I don't have. I'm just not that disciplined. I say what I feel. I think she holds things in too much. It drives me crazy. I just want her to yell and break down and be human. She almost sometimes seems like she'd rather just hide in her own shell than express her feelings, which is actually why I've actually asked for next season for her to have a shrink. She's going to combust, man. You got to give her somebody.
Perfect segue. I was going to say, how many of you think your character should be in therapy?
Yeah, for sure, Alicia should be in therapy.
We saw Norma try it, but yeah. What would things be like if they were in therapy?
Ineffective for Don. I think that would not it would not hold. I mean, as Vera was saying about Norma, like it's when your existence is the foundation of your existence is based on a lie. You either blow up that lie and start completely over, or you build a house on that foundation knowing that it's going to fall down. And in many ways that the big part of Don's story is the crumbling of that foundation and having to deal with what do you do then? So I don't think he's a good candidate for therapy.
Norman, what would you?
Kidding?
Do you think there's a therapist out there?
You gotta be joking.
What would his first session be about?
First off, he'd probably try to stab him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Murder might come up.
Yeah. I mean, Jesus. That's a whole show right there.
Spin-off, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the first day on set, and the first thing I have to say is I haven't even met the actors yet. They're all friends. They've all done all the press together. And I have to say, this thing about, can we cut off the bit that the zombie chewed off the deer and still eat the deer? And I'm looking up at them for the first time, and they look at me like, you idiot, you know what I mean? And the next thing I have to come up and I have to scream to Merle to eat squirrels. And I'm holding squirrels, right? And I'm like, how do you want, should I lasso this? Should I just throw, very confusing first day. But I get over there. I mean, it was insane.
It was weirdly a lot like Lizzie's first day on Master of Sex.
Exactly the same.
How do you want this?
Exactly the same conversation.
But I get over there and I turn around after they tell me all this stuff and I look at all these actors and they're just staring at me and I'm like, okay, this is who this guy is. He's like, no, he doesn't think anyone likes him. Like he's got a chip on his shoulder, super huge. But I mean, to take that kid into therapy, like, oh my God, like, I don't even know where to begin to answer the question. I don't think it would go over well.
I want Ray to go to therapy.
No, it's not gonna happen. It's just a different. It's a whole different culture. It's a whole.
Yeah.
I mean, we try a little bit this season. It's just, but it's not a. I don't know. It's not. Doesn't do anything for him.
How about Alicia? I mean, we see that she's going through a little depression following the death of...
I personally would love to see her in therapy, but she's such a wasp and she's so... I don't think she understands... I think it would be fascinating. I'd love to see her in therapy, but I don't think it would work for her, and I don't think the writers like the idea of it at all, because part of what makes Alicia is that she doesn't go to therapy. Right. It keeps the character. I just feel like, after playing a character for 5 years and sort of seeing this tightly wound ball only come undone when there's a tragedy and in the privacy of her own bedroom, I just feel like it's also really hard as an actor to constantly break down alone in an elevator or in your bedroom and the door closes and she breaks down. It's a very... When you speak to someone and you have lines that can get you to a place emotionally, it's not so hard, but I do more phone acting. And now that every character on television has a cell phone, except, well, maybe, actually, the three of you don't, right? Well, you don't either, do you? Yes, you do. But, you know, it's a whole new world with acting. I keep saying, like, they're like, and you're walking through and you're checking your BlackBerry, and I always think, oh my God, we would never do that on ER. You know, like we'd never have that distraction. And now we have a lot of this sort of personal to hand phone acting, and I find it a little disconcerting.
Well, let's carry on with the challenges that you faced in this past or recent season and how you sort of work through them. Who wants to go first? What was the most challenging scene?
The most recent episode of Mad Men that just aired was Don basically coming back to the office. And after having been fired at the end of season 6 and sort of, or put on leave at the end of season 6, and the way it was handled was that he comes back, but no one knows he's coming back. And so he has that incredibly awkward sort of first day of school moment where everyone's staring at him and he doesn't really know anybody. There have been personnel changes and people are in different offices and what's happening, and there's new people, and it's tremendously awkward. And shooting it was tremendously awkward because it had represented itself as a place that my character had not only founded, created, but was very comfortable in. And now it had been completely turned around and he was completely uncomfortable. And it was physically very uncomfortable to be that person that no one's really paying attention to, and everyone is sort of whispering about and side-eyeing. And
Joan too. I was like, Joan, be nicer to Don.
Listen, he's not anybody's favorite person at this point, but it was real. I mean, it very much felt like what it was, which was this awkward, out of place thing, and it was represented in the way he was treated by Stan and Peggy and Joan and Cutler and Lou and everyone else. It felt very real.
Did they all give you hugs after?
No.
No.
Not a huggy set.
Lizzy? I mean, I can imagine. Or is it not?
It's not.
Really?
It's not. But you don't even have to ask the question. No, rarely are, like sex and nudity scenes the most difficult because I'm very drunk during those scenes. I think probably the most difficult scene for Virginia was when Masters offers to pay her for her participation in the study, which equates to calling her a prostitute and sort of stripping away everything that they've built up together, this partnership. And the first season of my show, I see it as sort of an origin story for this team. And so, I don't remember what, probably halfway through, a little past halfway through, he strips away this thing that they've been building. And it is a strange thing, he had other secretaries, and then Caitlin Fitzgerald, who plays his wife, comes in and she's his secretary, and they're doing the presentation together, and it's a weird thing how I was jealous. I was doing all this other stuff, and I love all the other storylines that I do, but when I'm not just front and center in Master's life, I kind of get a little itchy. Yeah, it's really strange. And this, I don't think I'm supposed to talk about this season, but it's, the dynamic between the two of them is constantly 2 steps forward, 1 step back. One of them feels too close and pulls back. And the first season it was mostly Masters who would sort of take me along, and then when he got uncomfortable, just sort of rip the rug out from beneath me. And that gets exhausting after a while.
Norman?
Yeah, I mean, there was one episode called Still that was a 2-parter that was really exhausting. I mean, the thing about that character is he acts so tough, and he's so not a tough guy inside, I mean, that whole range to go from a grunting, angry guy to a little kid to somebody that opens up that whole thing was a drag. But the dynamic with Daryl and his brother, every time that would happen, so last season probably stabbing, seeing him, and because he's always tough, but when he sees his big brother, he sort of goes back down to little brother guy. So that was hard. And plus, just because you say goodbye to someone that you work with and it was your friend, there's that. But I think that stuff, the stabbing of Merle and killing him and dealing with that was hard.
Vera? Is it yelling Norman, like the top of your lungs?
You know, Norma is, I don't know, the character has got like Tolstoy's ego and Dostoevsky's like torment, and so it requires a lot of like emotional endurance. And I'm like a balloon, you know. There's several scenes. Yeah, my sort of the storyline with her brother coming and the incest past between them, and having to tell Dylan that he's a product, my oldest son, that he's a product of that incest. I think what's challenging for me, and this keeps happening with every one of these scenes, there's a scene coming up with Norman in the finale that was really required a lot of tenacity and endurance. And what's challenging for me, they always shoot him around lunch. And so I hate going to lunch, and then by that time you've already expended your energy, so you just go for the comfort food. And I'm like, load up on mac and cheese, and I come back and and it's just not working anymore, but it's my close-up.
Right.
That's always like that.
And that's what I find most challenging.
That is so brutally
I don't want to
honest.
go. I don't want to go to lunch. Right. And so I think that's where.
Lunch is a bitch. Lunch is a bitch. I think there's a difference between what's hard for Ray and what's hard for me. Lunch is difficult.
Lunch is difficult for Liev or Ray?
Yeah, lunch is difficult for Liev.
Okay.
I don't like taking my clothes off. I don't like putting my junk in that little Speedo flesh-colored thing. And
You do at lunch.
I know.
that's different. That's what I do at lunch. I don't like doing that in front of the crew with an actress I don't know very well. But
We're talking about lunch or
I'm
sex?
so confused.
when you wear the little Speedo?
Why are you wearing the Speedo at lunch?
Because it's
the
sun.
scene
We're in
before.
LA. It's not New York. No. John was mixing metaphors. No. We shot a scene today, and I mean, really, that is the thing. When you do this every day, it's like when you do this every day, it is about pacing yourself, and it is about your energy and how you eat, and I didn't realize how athletic acting was. I mean, I knew that from the theater that, you're doing 8 shows a week, you got to be fit to do it. But this really is a long haul, and you have to pace yourself during the day, and you have to pace yourself for the run of the season.
Right.
It's physically really demanding stuff. But we shot something today with Ray's daughter, played by Karis. Bridget is his daughter's name, and we did. It was in this episode this week that she kind of rebels against Ray and says something really
This
nasty
time?
to him.
Yeah.
She says something really nasty to him, and I found myself just like devastated that she'd said this off. And it wasn't my coverage, unfortunately. It was her coverage. She said the thing,
Always.
and I was like, oh. And then I realized, the camera's not on me, but that was so devastating, and that was really the things that are. I enjoy the things that are hard for Ray. I don't really like the things that are hard for Liev.
Do you save it when it's not on you? Do you try not to react?
Well,
the
the
way you
problem
would?
with that is that for me is that once I've experienced something, it's like that Heisenberg principle. Once I've experienced something, I've kind of wrecked it for myself as an actor, because then I'm trying to recreate it. And whenever I'm trying to recreate it, I'm back foot.
Yeah.
And it's not good because you want to have the thing happen in the moment, and it's usually reactive. It's often not when you say your line. It's when you're listening to the other
Right.
person say their line that the thing happens. And when you try to recreate that thing, you're suddenly not in the moment anymore. You're not being present, and you're not allowing access of the thing that should happen.
Right.
And so it is a problem when the thing happens at the wrong time, and you go, ooh, that's good, I got to remember
Right.
that. Because then you're in the scene remembering instead of listening.
Of feeling it too, yeah. How important is the relationship between showrunner and yourself? Because I know you came from film, and like you said like the dynamic between you and the director was crucial, and now here's a different setup.
This is the age of the writer, I think, 70s was kind of filmmakers, and now it's come around to the writer. At least in television, it feels that way. And that's good, you know, I think that has its ups and downs, but in our case, we have really great writers, and I like the approach that you approach making television through narrative rather than character or content or style, or you approach it through narrative, and I think that's a smart way to approach television. I think that's part of the success of these shows, is that they're, for the most part, they're driven by writing. But you know, you gotta fight to also keep them cinematic. But I think it's important to have a really creative person at the helm.
I mean, Norman, the show's gone through a few showrunners. Like, does it
Yeah.
impact? I would imagine it does.
I liked them all, and they were all different. What happened with that is it made the people back in the camp back in Georgia fight for this thing, and it made us all closer. But I think the showrunner is super important to the show. I mean, Scott, the guy that we have now, is so good at planning things out. Frank was kind of a huge personality and had brought what he did, and Glenn brought what he did. But Scott has his own thing, but he's brought this set of structure to what was going on down there. But I think the crew is hugely important as well. I mean, when you have new directors come in for episodes, and maybe it's their big thing or their break, or they have a big idea or something, sometimes it takes the crew down there and the showrunner to tell that person, you know, this is what we're doing here. You know, for example, like we'll have a director come in, and you know, they'll be, Norman, you can stand right here, you can stand right here, you can stand right here. I'll be like, can I just stand around here? You know, and then our DP will, you know, we got him covered. Daryl's always walking around. It's like, we got him. You know, so they sort of, having those showrunners lead brought that group closer together. But I think it's hugely important, the showrunner.
Well, and key to making your characters three-dimensional is how they react to other people. Do you have like a favorite character that your character interacts with? Do you like the way your character is around a certain other character on the show?
I love the way Alicia reacts with Eli Gold, because I mean, Alan Cumming is a dear friend of mine anyway, and it's so rare that we get scenes together, but when we do, I think she's constantly shocking him in ways that makes her laugh, because to her it's so not a shock, but he's so earnest and stern, and yet he's completely lost when it comes to Alicia, and I think she likes playing him. We just have a really good time together on the set, and I love watching. I mean, he used to be Josh Charles, but he's no longer with the good wife. That was a special relationship. I loved how Alicia and he danced together and around each other. But Alan definitely is one of those people.
Vera, it's like a tighter circle there, but
It's a tighter circle, and of course I cherish the relationship with Norman. I mean, that's the story focuses on mother and son, and Freddie is outstanding. But I really like my scenes when I look forward to all the scenes with Nestor Carbonell, who plays Romero.
Yeah.
And I think this is what I respond to your character so much. I think when you were talking about the fact that, you know, he doesn't talk much, I'm thinking, what? He talks all the time. I'm thinking, what's so beatific about your character, what's so beautiful is that there's so much that's unspoken, and subtextually your character is so rich, and and that's where, and with Romero, it's that similar relation. There's so much that's unspoken, and there's so much subtext. It's just drenched with subtext, and there's this magnetism, and yet they're opposites. So I think that one, Romero.
John?
Yeah, I could answer it in a couple different ways, but I think the one that's probably the loaded with the most sort of uncertainty and history and layers is the relationship between Don and Peggy. It's come so far from the beginning of the show to where it is now, and yet it's still can surprise you with its anger and meanness its tenderness and its vulnerability. I think that's probably the deepest relationship that Don has with anyone on the show, and it's a work relationship. You know, there is no family really to that. There's certainly no sexuality to that. There's no nothing there other than two people who believe in each other's creative abilities and talent, and yet have a hard time being in the same room together sometimes. And Elizabeth is an incredibly talented actress as well. So it's always fun to be in scenes because you just immediately trust that you're in good hands on the other side of the conversation.
Lizzy, you're also tight.
Yeah, well, obviously with Michael Sheen, because it would be a nightmare if I didn't like being in scenes with him. Yeah, which could happen.
Yeah.
There's time. But he and I are very much on the same page when it comes to keeping this relationship between Masters and Johnson, this kind of nebulous, undefinable thing from moment to moment. We never want them to be clearly in love or not in love, or have their relationship be in any way obvious to each other or to the audience. And so in every beat we really strive for that. But beyond that relationship, I really like working with Julianne Nicholson, who plays DePaul. She's ridiculously talented and just a wonderful girl, but on top of that, her character has cancer, and we go much deeper into that in the second season, and she's one of those actresses that the lines are so blurred between what's real and what's not that now when I see her, it's just kind of like difficult not to cry, because she's so just like this.
And she carries herself like she's so strong.
She's amazing. Yeah, she's amazing, but she's also, she's strong, but this kind of just vulnerable. This wound of a woman. When she breaks down, there's something very, very tough to watch when somebody that strong breaks down, and I don't know anybody who does it better than she does.
Norman, I feel like if you don't say Carol, people will
stone
you.
It'd be cool. It'd be cool.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'd probably Carol. I mean, Melissa. She's, she just, I mean, the character changed with her and I. My character changed a lot when they put us together. And it's because of her. She's such a good actress, and she gets me, I feel free to be vulnerable in front of her because she gets me. Like, she's my buddy, and you can read everything on her face. She's just a window, so it's easy to act with her and be in something that means something and not pay attention to anything but that, because it's so big. Probably her. But I mean, I have special relationships with them all, but that one would be mine. Yeah.
Ray? Oh, Ray, look at me. Liev? Were you as bummed as me that you didn't get to be in the scene with John Voight when he was in the towel? Were you there on set?
Yeah, I was actually. Yeah. I was. That was a very special scene.
Very special scene, yes.
For a number of reasons.
Yes.
But while there are great fireworks with John and with Mick and Ray's relationship, I like Ray when he's with, and I enjoy acting with, the young woman who plays my daughter, Kara Dorsey, who I think is just an amazing actress. And when you're doing this kind of minimalistic riff on masculinity, to see this person with his daughter is really fun. It's exciting. And I think also being the father of two small children, there's this thing in me all the time that's very easy and pleasurable to access and gives me lots of energy, which is a tenderness. And the tenderness that occurs between the two of them as characters is something that I really love about the show, particularly as in how it juxtaposes the other stuff in the show. And she's also just a damn fine actress. So I would say that.
We're seeing the kids, I mean, Norman, Daryl doesn't have kids, but the way the kids are sort of integrated into the shows dramas nowadays is very interesting. They have like a heightened part now in terms of revealing stuff about the characters, and we saw it with Grace a lot. Do you want to talk a little bit about them as parents, or how the kids have sort of moved their stories?
Well, I think you have to get really lucky, depending upon how old the kid is when you start. Our show's been going on for 7 seasons, but it's been the better part of 9 years. So Kiernan was 6 years old when she started and was a completely different human being, and you don't know that this person is going to develop into this, actress. She might not like to do it, and after a certain amount of time. So it's tricky, and it's tricky for kids, and it's hard to schedule around kids, and there's all the production stuff notwithstanding, but it is tricky. And then there's content. You don't want to like expose these kids to like the weirdness that we've exposed to them on our show, but Kiernan's learned a lot.
Yes.
How old is she in real life?
She's going to be 15 this summer. So, over half of her life has been on this show. And so you kind of roll the dice, and because you obviously don't know how long the show's going to last, but if the full run of the show, you're going to have a different person at the end of the day than you had at the beginning. And we've been incredibly lucky to have found, Kiernan. We've had 5 different actors play Bobby. For whatever reason, boys are harder to kind of wrangle, and they get distracted much easier, but Kiernan has been a constant and is wonderful, and I love working with her and have from the beginning. But it has been a different experience watching her get older. It's certainly easy to feel like her father because I have watched her grow up.
Right.
And it's been interesting to see her kind of process this world that she's learning more and more about, because it fits very nicely with the story.
Right. Well, Norman, you mentioned earlier planting seeds along the way, and do you ever forget what you filmed in a last episode because you're like jumping far ahead, or you're reading a script that's like, is it ever hard to remember what your character's emotions last were, like where you're coming from?
Do you mean when you're actually shooting a scene, or do you mean
like when you're starting a new episode, but like you're reading a script for a different episode and you don't remember what the last episode was about?
No, we're on such a tight turnaround that we're probably shooting the last scene, and then the next day we're shooting for us it's a machine that doesn't stop, so it's pretty close together. There's never enough time to forget, unless if it's 2 episodes ago, then I need to remind myself or ask someone. I always go up to the script supervisor, and I find that script supervisors are actually my best friend on set, because for me it's so much legal dialogue, and there's this incredible relationship I have with Rachel Connors, who's our script supervisor. She's an English major. And I think our writers do an amazing job, and I try to just get the writing exactly as said. And whenever I can't think of something or it's not coming out right, I look at her and I go, there's a word I'm not getting. And we just have this great relationship where she keeps me on track. Because I think when you're there every day with that, we do 9 to 10 pages of dialogue a day. And I have to have a support system. I'm pretty good at learning it, and I always feel like it's my job as the person who's there the most to show up knowing my stuff, so that if I can know it after a 15-hour day the day before, then the guest star better know it just for coming in for 2 hours. I always feel like you have to set up an example for everyone, so that so that the crew can go home to their families, and we can keep it moving, and it also keeps it fresh. So I always feel like that's it's very important to be friendly to your script supervisor and appreciate the work they do, and they keep you on track for just what time of day it is, or who did I just say goodbye to, because maybe it's 3 scenes ago.
You shot it last Tuesday.
Yeah.
And you're like, what am I coming out of? What am I going into? And what's the...
It's nice to know that you don't have to do everyone's job. When you have a great crew, they're doing it with you, and that's helpful.
Are you ever jumbled? Like, what did I just...
No. I mean, it's a similar thing for me, as Julianna was saying, is that you want to set an example. You want to be you never want to be the person that anyone's waiting on.
Right.
And it's because it can go two ways. If you set a negative example, then that trickles down to the whole rest of everything, and then all of a sudden you're not making days and you're behind, and the studio's calling and everyone's saying what's going on. But if it goes the other way and everyone kind of gets inspired and everyone feels that way, then it feels really good. I can't remember. Again, as Julianna was saying, like during a season, it's so tight. We don't have time off. We don't have hiatus weeks. We don't have it's not 3 weeks on, 1 week off. It's
Nonstop.
14 weeks on for us, and maybe there'll be a holiday or something in there. But it's pretty nonstop. So I can remember season by season. But then the next season, it's like, remember that time where episode 4, and I'm like, which one was episode 4? What did I do? Who you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that stuff tends to go away, the order of things. But you know, I don't remember things about my own past. So the 90s are a bit of a blur for me. So
You look like you want to say something.
Oh,
Or
no,
not.
no, I was just agreeing with him. For me, I have a great short-term memory, but I can get frazzled, and I do rely heavily on my script supervisor, in particular with. It seems it's sort of trended that Tucker Gates, the supervising director, has directed the first 2 and the last 2 of the season, and those in particular are because we shoot them at the same time, and for efficiency and locations, to consolidate locations, we shoot 2 episodes at a time, and that's really hard to gauge and remember. Yeah.
They call there's a name for it.
Doubling up.
Boarding, something boarding.
crossboarding.
Cross-boarding.
Cross-boarding, thank you.
Wow. Yeah.
You're going to talk about crossboarding?
I was gonna touch on.
You're going to talk about wakeboarding?
No.
Snowboarding?
That's for later. No, crossboarding.
Oh, crossboarding.
Only crossboarding. Yeah, we shot the first season or the second season that we're on. We were like a month in, and we shot 1 and 2 episodes, 1 and 2 together, and then 4, and now we're on 3, and it's extremely confusing. I think if this happened the second half of the season, I would be really screwed. But you come in really prepared at the beginning. But it requires so much work when you get home. Like it's we don't leave work. You go home and you learn the 9 pages for the next day. And yeah, I agree. If you didn't have an amazing script supervisor, or we're starting to figure out which directors work really well for our show, and I look forward to the days when it's down to like 2 or 3 people tops, because I do think, Norman, what you were saying, when the director comes in, I think with this amazing time in television, that relationship still hasn't been fully hammered out. The episodic director who comes in and,
I think it's the hardest job.
It's a really hard job.
Doing episodic TV as a director.
Because you don't really, a lot of times it feels like, we could probably maybe even do this without a director. And
it's a machine of its own, and also the writers tell the director what they want. And so it's sort of, I probably am too empathetic to them, but I always go up to every director that comes. Also, I always find them a little bit afraid. Well, you know your character so much more than I would. And I always go up to a director first day and say, direct me. I want to see it through someone else's eyes. And it'll give me the challenge to maybe see something differently. I've been doing this character for 5 years. I'd love to, see something different if someone else sees it. If I disagree, I'll let you know, but at least we can try. And that way I just feel like they can relax a little bit into what their job is. But I always feel like directors who aren't familiar directors on the show, because we usually have a revolving door of directors.
Well, and Josh recently directed, right?
He's directed a bit. He directed last year
What's
too.
that like?
I love it. I love being directed by an actor. I love it because on television, there's such a time schedule and it's nonstop, go, go, go. So directors are always like, that was great. Yeah, but actors get behind you as an actor and help you with your performance in a way that I think they're not afraid to approach a television actor who's been doing this character for a long time. I find every time an actor, Griffin Dunn directs our show, and it's always, there's this fresh energy, and they get excited behind the camera watching the actors, and it's sweet and kind, and you feel, supported by them.
Liev, you're going to direct an episode, right? Of
Indeed,
Ray?
I am
Are you
prepping it now.
nervous? Did you give him any tips, Jon? You've directed.
Sleep. That was the only one. But he
No,
knows that.
he did. He actually did give me some good. I went for him as soon as we got here. I went right to pick his brain, and he said some smart things. It's you know.
What made you want to do it? You wanted to just experience it from the other side, or
Torture.
Boredom? No. No, I wanted. I did want to experience it from the other side, and it's like, you know, for me personally, it's like test riding a sports car. And I feel like there's this beautiful machine that runs really well, and I'm going to try not to crash it. But I'm dying to get a ride in that machine.
Nice.
And I'm very grateful that they've allowed me to have a test drive.
Ladies, Norman, would you ever want to get behind the camera?
I have directed before, and contractually, but not for the moment. I'll tell you why. Because Carlton Cuse does not give you final edit, and I want final edit.
I don't think any TV show does.
Yeah, no.
Really?
I mean, yeah.
HBO, really?
No, I don't think any TV show
That's
does.
the
The creative executive producers always
And
have final
that's
cut.
one of the things that I'm finding is it's a completely different exercise,
Yeah,
and
it
it's a lot like if you've ever done a commercial or something like there are many things that are similar, but they're now so cinematic that you get to do a lot more, and there's a tremendous range of possibility and potential, especially with the actors on my program. But I think all of them have the same situation, which is that you deliver it to
You give your
the
final
showrunner
cut,
who
yeah.
delivers it to the studio,
Right.
and
Yeah.
ultimately
Always.
it's the head
So
of the
many
studio.
hands it has to pass through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to direct my show, especially because, I mean, I haven't directed stuff before, and I can't imagine a safer environment to give it a shot.
Yeah.
Because, you know, get to know these people so well. I trust my crew so much that I think it would be a good jumping off point.
Norman?
I mean, never say never, but I mean, I've directed little weird art films. That's all I've ever directed. I mean, being inside the head of Miles Davis and stuff. I mean, I don't know that I could have that many cooks in my kitchen if I'm making a meal. I think it would freak me out. But never say never. But then, that show is so like emotion this way and you get cut off. Emotion that way you get cut off. We never have long speeches that we say on that show ever. I mean, you start something and something blows up, and you know someone gets killed. I mean, it's always emotion heavy, stop emotion heavy, and that's exhausting. But to my fellow actors on the show, I don't know that I can walk in that water. You know what I mean?
Well, people say you learn from your failures, and I remember my first reporting internship, I forgot to get someone's age, and the copy desk let me have it. Not in a bad way, but just always remember to get the person's age. With your first acting credit, do you remember something that like stuck with you that has stayed with you since then? You were like a bartender, right? In a Zorro costume?
Yes, I was. Thank you for reminding me. Episode of a television show called Providence. That was a Friday night television show on NBC, starring one Melina Kanakarides, Mike Farrell, and Paula Kale. I was brought in as a guest star who was a bartender. Then there was a costume party. It was around Halloween, and then I dressed as Zorro somehow. And
I'm sure we'll incorporate a clip around this
well, enjoy.
point. Yes.
But I remember I was the guest star that day, and it was 15-hour, 16-hour days in the glorious days of network TV when they used to go crazy overtime. And it was on location. They had the location for one day. They had hard out at a certain time. There were 250 extras, all in crazy costumes. Melanie Mayron was the director. She was absolutely lovely. And it was the first thing I had ever done. And so I was completely wide-eyed and really had no idea what I was doing, vis-a-vis marks, vis-a-vis lights, vis-a-vis standing the thing, vis-a-vis finding the lens. I was like, oh my God. And the crew were incredibly kind, and people were incredibly pleasant, even given all of the things that we had to do, which was get out of this location on time. There were 250 extras that had to go through lunch again. And the clock was ticking from the second we stepped on stage or on set, and it was
Sorry.
Got it. Did you?
Oh, it's been driving me nuts.
Killed it.
Oh, the Olympic plans, yes.
And it was terrifying. And I think the sort of learning experience was, put one foot in front of the other, and at the end of the day, you're going to find yourself at the end of the day. And that's what I just sort of decided to do. And don't be afraid to ask people. Like, if you don't understand something, don't be afraid to ask a question. If you sit there and you just clam up and you think, oh God, I'm ruining this, or I'm doing it wrong, I'm doing it, you're not going to learn. Ask. And I'm incredibly solicitous of when the guest stars come on. It's like, come on, if you don't feel comfortable, like, let me know, or let someone know, because if you're just going to sit there and stew, then you're going to open your mouth and you're not, and no one's going to believe what's coming out. So like, let it go, breathe. You're here, you got the gig, we got plenty of film in the camera, like, let's roll.
Lizzy, do you remember any?
Yeah, I mean, it's a
tales?
similar thing. My first job was the pilot of Freaks and Geeks, and I had one line, and I think I said it like 2,000 times in my trailer, like putting the inflection on different syllables of my like 4-word line. And I did exactly what you said. I clammed up and I was super intimidated, and I'd never been on a set, and all these kids were like clearly best friends, and nobody wanted to hang out with me because I was the weird shy girl in the corner who was like whispering this one line to myself.
Your mantra.
Yeah, and I think, probably for the first 5 years of my career, most of what I learned was just observing the leads of the movie or the show that I was doing, and I learned a lot about, unfortunately, how not to be.
Yeah.
Because I started when I was like 15, and actors and actresses around that age are really something.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, ego that comes with trying to figure out who you are in the world, and also being given a lot of power on a set. And I saw a lot of really bad behavior, and it really informed what kind of actress I hope that I became, which is being very, as open and conversational with as many people as I possibly can, because it really does make a difference. And
Full disclosure, we did a pilot together.
He got fired off of the pilot. That's where we met 10 years ago.
It was Lizzy's fault.
It was. I didn't want him there. But yeah, I think, and that's like one of the, if not the only great benefit of being a struggling actor for a really long time. You really learn some good behavior tips.
Look how nervous looking at you. What did you learn on your first gig?
I mean, it was a movie, but that I too showed up and had no clue what I was doing. I didn't know anything. But somehow I booked this movie, and there was a scene in the movie where what happens is the father is in a drunk driving accident. He's in a wheelchair, and all this stuff happens to this kid, and the father wheels himself out as the kid's crying. And he sort of gets up out of the chair and gives him a hug, and it's a big deal. So the director, before we do it, he said, "How do you want to prepare to do this?" And I'm like, "Well, what are my options? Like, what are you talking about?" Right? And so I said, "Give me a cell phone and just come get me in a minute." And coincidentally, my real father was in a wheelchair and he was dying. So I called him and just had a normal conversation. And then we came out, and the first take, I cried so much that so much snot came out of my nose that they couldn't use the take, which I begged them to use, but they didn't. Then we did it again, and we broke for lunch. And then
Lunch is ruining everyone's.
yeah, and then this grip came up to me, and I didn't go to lunch. I took a little nap in this trailer that was about this big, and this grip came up to me, and he goes, "I know you've never done this before, and we were in Maine where it was freezing and people ate in a tent with heaters and stuff. And he goes, the tent was totally quiet and a lot of people weren't eating, and I was like, oh, that's what this is. Like, I thought this was something else, But I'll never forget that. That was, yeah. I still feel like I'm learning all the time. I don't know, Stanislavski technique. I don't know any of that crap, And I'm sure it's great, but I just don't know it. I'm still sort of a new soul to all this, I guess. But that day was a big deal. Yeah.
Vera?
I think if I remember correctly, like my first gig was as a day player doing skits on the Conan O'Brien show, and so I think that's how I got my SAG card. And I think the first skit was playing Conan's pregnant, lactating, scorned girlfriend, and basically squirting breast milk in his face, and having this whole Jimmy rig, and it's like, literally, and I'm not sure.
I auditioned for that.
And I'm not sure what I learned from that.
Clearly a lot.
That was in front of the camera. But I think for me, the first time that I really felt inapt and was doing theater. I was playing Julia in Two Gentlemen of Verona. In White River Junction Community Theater, Vermont, and during one of the dress rehearsals, the director comes up to me and says, "You have no sense of irony."
Whoa.
And so I've just been working on it since.
Julianna?
My very first TV gig was actually with Chris Noth and Jerry Orbach. And it was a Law and Order episode, as every New York actor does. Right. And I just remember, I had never been on camera before. And I remember when they did Chris's, we were in a car, and of course I was playing Latino, as I always played back then, because they didn't know what to do with me. And I was a Navy officer, and I was in the back of his car, and they were in the front, and the camera was on them, their close-ups first, and it was really late at night. We were in the Brooklyn Navy Yards, and I remember them saying action. I remember watching Chris go, and like doing this thing that he did, and I'd only ever done theater, so I was like, what? How's he? Oh, is that because the camera's so close? See, I didn't understand where the lens was. I didn't understand what they were seeing. So when they finally turned around to me and they were doing the close-up, I remember being so insecure about my lips and thinking that they were moving like that, like doing a little, that I couldn't get the line out because I kept thinking that this lip.
The twitchy lip.
And it was so horrible. I was so self-conscious. And on stage, I'd never been self-conscious. You know, on stage, it's sort of, there's nothing like this. And I just remember that feeling of like, oh my, and then I got it. I got why he, like, knew, like, I don't know how he did. I just remember being so taken aback by the idea of mugging for the camera. Like, to me, that was not what you did, you know, and then all of a sudden when it was on, it wasn't a good, I'm surprised I ever went back, actually, after that experience.
Yeah.
My first gig was a Nora Ephron movie called Mixed Nuts, and I played a suicidal transvestite.
Yes.
And I think the first...
It's a great wig.
Thank you.
Yes.
Picked that myself, actually, on
Really?
14th Street.
Before it was cool, Jared.
Yeah. But I had the, I actually, that was, I made a number of mistakes in that role. But I think the biggest one was the choice to wax instead of shave.
Should I ask where or no?
I'm a pretty hirsute person, and it's fairly curly hair. So when you rip it out at the root, not only is it extremely painful, but it grows back curly, and you have this phenomenon called razor bumps.
Yes, we all.
Yeah, well, that sounds really razor bumps. Oh, I'm so
But you
sorry.
know-
like,
No,
should I play
wait
my
a minute.
violin
Wait,
for you?
imagine
Try it
that.
once a
Imagine
month.
that stuff.
Imagine it where?
Imagine that stuff in your crotch all over your entire body. Your entire
After the
body
crotch,
is
the
one
body doesn't
gigantic.
count.
beast.
Imagine over your crotch on a regular basis.
They're not
At
playing the
time.
violins for you.
Well, I never did it again, so I learned my lesson.
Well, I think it's only fitting that we sort of wrap things up by talking about the TV's biggest day, Emmys. First of all, are you guys okay with it being on a Monday? Does that bother you?
It really bothers me.
Bothers me.
Well, the only
I
trouble.
think it means we sort of get a day off.
Yeah, that might be nice.
I'm thinking that's cool because Sunday you got to give up your weekend. You know,
If you're filming in LA, if you're filming in New York and that happens,
well, it blows for you.
it's tough on the production, honestly.
Yeah.
Because usually you take the red eye back and go to work Monday morning, but when it's on a Monday, that means you know, you lose a day of I mean, I don't know how we would do it. We'd probably be doing there's no way they'd shut production down
Why is it on a Monday?
because of football.
Oh, football, right. Yeah.
But the drama category is something that we hear people talk about every year about how there's just too many good dramas out there and there's 5 slots. And, you know, what do you make of how things are expanding and like there's not enough room? Do you think something should be done? Should it be more contenders, or should there be more,
like the Oscars?
More categories? I mean, and we see the miniseries.
10 best dramas.
Yeah, we see the miniseries try to go into drama, or dramas go into comedy to try to find a way in. What do you make of everything?
I don't really understand it, to be perfectly honest. But you mean like creating more sub? Is that what's happening? They're creating more subcategories.
No, do you think they should, just because there's so many good dramas out there and not enough room on the ballot, or is it better that way?
You mean things like best lead actor in television show with the initials LS? Works for me.
You know, it's probably why there are so many award shows, and you know, so that more actors and productions and stories get sort of that pat on the back that they deserve.
So miniseries are in with dramas, or
No,
is
but
it
some shows
Yes,
want
some of
to.
them are.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah. Some shows enter themselves as
I don't know
dramas.
if I like that.
Yeah.
I mean, here's where it gets tricky. I think when you're when that happens, like they put True Detective. You're talking about True Detective, right?
Yeah. Well, we
And
saw it with
John
Downton Abbey.
Landgraf came out and said that was.
Is that considered a miniseries?
Well, yes, that's how it was sold on
how it was sold.
HBO.
Oh, right,
It
because
was
they-
8 parts,
I get
and
it,
those
right,
actors,
sorry.
and then it was a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it was gone. And
It
then
was
they
the same rationale used to put American Horror Story in miniseries, which is now in its 4th season of its miniseries status.
Right. So it's a weird.
But basically, their show, I mean, they had 2 actors, Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey, who now are done. They did 8 episodes, and they're done.
But they're going to have 2 different actors.
Right, but what the argument is within the industry is that that's considered a miniseries. It's 8 episodes. It's actors you're not going to see further on. A series is about these lives of people that you keep
Following.
going through.
That's fair
And,
enough. That seems like a separate category.
Yeah, but it should. I think it should, and I you know, but it. I mean, you know, what are you going to do?
It makes it longer, though. That's the problem.
It also hasn't been approved by the Academy, and you know, the Academy is the one that ultimately makes that decision, and it's their
It's
party.
their party. I mean, it's all.
It is what it is. It probably gets back to the thing we started the whole thing with, which is that there are so many different ways to present stories at this point, where there used to be just 2, half hour, an hour. And then the very special event miniseries, which was Winds of War, or Roots, or Holocaust, whatever it was. Those were those were it. And now there's, you know, Party Down on Stars, which is like 6 episodes or per season, or you know, 10 episodes
Downton
on
Abbey
Netflix.
was 8. Breaking Bad is 8 episodes. 8 episodes.
Yeah. And it's impossible to kind of just say it's one thing anymore. And I think, you know, I don't think it's broken. I think, you know, by nature, any award show is going to have some sort of controversy involved with it, because there's always going to be someone who's left out, whether it's the Tony Awards, the Emmy Awards, the Oscars, or whatever it is. That's the nature of selecting one thing as the best.
But better to have too many than not enough. Right. I mean, the good news is that there's a lot of great shows.
Yes, I think that's the one thing that you know that you can take away from it, is that we are living in this kind of tall cotton where we get a chance to really watch so much good stuff that's enlightening and interesting and funny and cinematic, and you know, it's just it's filling a hole that existed that doesn't anymore.
And the landscape is changing. I mean, Netflix, it's changing. It's and everyone has to be open to it. And maybe that means there should be new rules, but right now it's, you know, it is what it is.
It is what it is. Well, guys, those were my questions. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you.
Sorry about the little naps.
That was a good job.